While New Super Mario Bros. Wii will always be my favorite, New Super Mario Bros. DS is a great sequel to the Wii game. It might not have the charm and playfulness that the Wii game did have, but it does have some pretty great level design and awesome world themes. But which of those worlds are the best, and which are the worst? Well, today we're gonna find that out, as I'm gonna be ranking every single world in Newer Super Mario Bros. DS. This list is based on how enjoyable the levels in the world are, how cool the world's themes and bosses are, and my experiences with them as well. So without further ado, let's get started. 8. Dory's Island. A world made up of half underwater and half forest, which is honestly a recipe for nothing great. We all know how slow and tedious underwater levels are, and while forest levels can be pretty fun, the ones in this world aren't really. Plus, the majority of levels in this world are water levels, which makes it even worse. 2 boring levels with Unagis and Skeeters, a level with a mini mushroom which nobody likes, and another uninteresting level with basically no gimmick at all. And for the forest section of the world, you also have nothing special. A boring tower, relatively boring auto-scroller with Dory, and another slow level with honeycombs. And of course, don't forget about the ghost house, which is also just awful. Luckily, the castle level is alright, with a pretty cool section where you have to stay in between spiked balls. But otherwise, this world is just a bummer. 7. Pumpkin Boneyard. A lot of people are probably gonna disagree, but Pumpkin Boneyard isn't really a great world, let alone a memorable one. The identically named world from the Wii game wasn't really the best. Not much room for potential because of the ghost theme, and most of the levels felt like filler. And pretty much the same can be said for the DS version of this world. The first 3 levels are just really basic and bland, with only the gooey substance being a somewhat interesting gimmick, unfortunately with a wasted potential. The level with the moving bone platforms is pretty fun, as well as the levels with the falling platforms and the rising hills. Unfortunately, the tower is basically an auto-scroller, and the airship level has to be underwater, making them more boring than they should have been. And of course, the ghost house is yet again pretty terrible, basically being Spot the Difference, which is never fun in a Mario game. And then there's also a level in the dark, which is also never fun to play. There's a few good levels, but not much, and even the ones that are good aren't that much. 6. Gold Leaf Plains. The first world in the game, and therefore it's important that it gives a good first impression, and it does it just fine. All of the levels are really easy as expected, but they also aren't too memorable as a result. 1-1 is a short level, maybe even too short for a first level. 1-2 is very basic, as well as the rest of the world. And while that's not a bad thing for a first world, it does result in a world that's also not too great. At least 1-5 is pretty fun, and the water level is actually not underwater, but there's also a bunch of flaws. The tower and castle levels are forgettable, the bosses are terrible, and even the world's theme is pretty lame. I'm not trying to sound harsh or anything, but this world is sort of making me. Not a bad world, but also not a great one. 5. Crystal Sewers. A mashup of Wii's Crystal Caves and Soggy Sewers, and it makes for a pretty cool theme, but the theme isn't the only thing that's important to make for an enjoyable world. There are some great levels in this world. 2-3 takes place in the sewers with some cool mechanics like manholes and flipping gates. 2-4 is a very fun minecart level, though the second minecart level is a bit better, and 2-5 is a nice break from the caverns, being a fun athletic level with tight ropes. However, the rest of the world's levels are quite forgettable. 2-1 does feature the hammer suit, the best power-up in the game by far, but isn't an interesting level on its own. 2-2 features a dull mechanic with breaking pipes. The mini mushroom level is yet again not great, being a slow auto-scroller. 2-6 is a boring underwater level, and the tower and airship levels are very generic with no real interesting gimmicks to intrigue the player. Not to mention, the bosses are once again absolutely terrible. So while this world does have some great highlights and pretty amazing levels, there's also a few that aren't great. Overall, this world is enjoyable, but not much. 4. Koopa Country. Just like World 3, another mix of themes, this time being deserts and volcanoes. The desert theme is never really too great in a Mario game, and the same is true for this one. The first level is nothing special, the second level has slow gameplay with falling quicksand, then there's a boring tower which has an annoying gimmick, and of course a level with the freaking wind. At least there's one decent level with the angry sun and mad moon. They're a little annoying to deal with, but at least the level is fun. Then we get to the volcano section of the world, and things get much better. The tank level is very cool and has by far the best boss in the game besides the final Bowser fight. The level with the spiky snake blocks is very original, and of course that awesome minecart level which is always fun to play. The final castle is also pretty good, with 3 different mechanics all executed in great ways. The final Bowser fight is just okay. It's basically just a compilation of Bowser battles from other Mario games, and it's honestly pretty boring at times. And the rest of the levels in the volcano section are pretty good and very fun to play through. Overall, this world is kinda 50-50. The desert portion is mostly pretty bad, while the volcano section is pretty great. 3. Moonview Glacier. Getting into the top 3, we have not a snowy world at day, but a snowy world at night instead, which makes for a beautiful atmosphere. And unlike Crystal Sewers, which has some good levels and some bad levels, Moonview Glacier mostly has very solid ones. A fun athletic auto-scroller, a pretty creative tower, and another great athletic level with rotating platforms. The Freeze Flame themed levels are also pretty great, the one with the tilting chain platforms definitely being the better one. Unfortunately, the ghost house is yet again pretty terrible, King Boo being the only saving grace it has, which is a pretty cool boss. And the rest of the levels, including Castle, are pretty good. Not really the most memorable bunch, but they are pretty fun and have some cool gimmicks to offer. So yeah, pretty great world. It's just a shame it had to have another ghost house. 2. Lunar Realm. Barely not the best. We have the world with by far the best in the game, space. And this world handles the theme really well. It's only unfortunate that you can't wall jump in space, but at least the developers had some creative ways around that, like bouncing on snake horns or just clever level design. As for the levels themselves, you've got some fillery ones like 6A and 6-6, but also some absolutely fantastic ones like 6-2, 6-7, and you probably guessed it, 6-5, the Rainbow Road themed level, by far one of the best in the game. And of course, 6-7 is that awesome zero gravity level with a sweet remix of the Star Maze theme from Mario Land 2. The tower and airship levels are for once not that bad, making great use of the low gravity mechanic from this world. Even the auto-scroller isn't that bad, just a little bit slow. And overall, this world is very enjoyable and has some great highlights. It's just a shame there's no heaven-themed levels like in the Wii game. And number 1 is Cirrus Heavens. If you've played this game, this probably won't be a surprise. Cirrus Heavens is by far the most enjoyable world of the bunch. And even if this world might be a tad bit too long, containing a huge total of 11 levels, the levels that are here are very fun to play. Well, at least besides the ghost house, but at least it's the best ghost house in the game, featuring a very interesting gimmick involving fake terrain. The rest of the levels are very enjoyable, even including the tower level, which are otherwise pretty bland. 7-2 is a very bouncy levels with bunchers and even a very neat reference to a stage from Mario Bros. 3. 7-3 is a very interesting mix of seesaw platforms and spiked balls, making for a very cool challenge. 7-5 has you going through a field with gigantic enemies, and of course we can't forget about by far the best mini mushroom level in a game, 7-7. Bouncing on bonsai bills is an ingenious idea for a level executed in amazingly creative ways. And I didn't even mention the Thundercloud stage, which is admittedly a little slow at times, but still a fantastic follow-up to its predecessor from the Wii. The only thing that could have made this world better would have been an airship level, but even then, this world is great and definitely my favorite in the game. So yeah, that was it for this ranking video. Let me know what your least favorite and favorite worlds are in the comments. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and do more of that fancy stuff, and I hope to see you in the next video. Goodbye!